Have you ever heard of an institution that's been quietly shaping the lives of millions for over 60 years, but, almost nobody knows its name? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on the Pakistan Academy for Rural Development, or PARD, to figure out just how foundational it's been for the country.
So just how important is this place? Well, get this. In 1997, the United Nations itself sat up and took notice. They officially designated PARD a Center of Excellence for Human Resource Development. And this wasn't for some new project. It was a shout-out for decades of foundational work. So what exactly is that work? The best way to think of PARD is as the unsung architect of rural Pakistan. It's not the flashy building you see from the street. Nope, it's the blueprint, the foundation, the very framework that everything else rests on. It literally designs the systems that govern and develop huge parts of the nation. So at its heart, PARD is this super specialized academy with one clear mission: train the people who are actually on the front lines of rural development. We're talking everyone from government officers to local community leaders. It's all about building up the skills of the people who make rural Pakistan tick.
Okay, to really get PARD's impact, we've got to rewind the clock. Let's go back to the 1950s. This was a really formative time for Pakistan. The nation was brand new, and it desperately needed new institutions to build a modern state from the ground up, especially out in its vast rural heartland. And you can see from this timeline, this wasn't some accident. It was a really deliberate plan. The whole idea for PARD actually sprouted from something called the Village Aid Program in the 50s. Then, bam, by 1957, it's set up as its own independent organization. And just 2 years later, in 59, the doors are officially open for training. This was a strategic move, plain and simple, to tackle a massive national challenge. And here's a cool fact. PARD was an international collaboration from day one. It partnered with Michigan State University, and that was a huge deal. It meant all its programs were infused with world-class academic standards and modern research methods right from the start. This wasn't just some local effort. It had global expertise baked right into its DNA. PARD wasn't created in a vacuum either. It actually had a twin, the now famous academy in Kamila, which was in what was then East Pakistan. And both of them were shaped by this one visionary, Dr. Akhtar Hamid Khan. He was the one who championed the idea that real development isn't something you do to people, it's something you do with them.
All right, so how does this architect actually, build? Well, its entire operation rests on this simple but really powerful three-pillar model. It's a model that has supported the whole institution for more than half a century.
So it all starts with training, right? Building up the skills of officials and regular folks. That then feeds directly into research. And we're not talking about dusty library research. This is out in the field, studying real-world problems. And finally, you've got extension, which is all about getting that knowledge out there to create actual, lasting change. It's a constant cycle: learn, test, and share. And each part makes the others stronger. Now, the absolute key to this whole thing is something called action research. This is PARD's secret sauce for bridging that gap between a good idea and making it work in practice. The teachers and the students literally go into these designated laboratory villages to test their ideas out with real communities. It's what keeps their work grounded, practical, and honestly, super relevant. Okay, so we've seen the model, but what does all this look like in the real world? Like, who actually feels the impact of PARD's work? Let's take a look at how this whole framework actually translates into action on the ground across Pakistan. I mean, just look at the reach here. It is incredibly broad. PARD trains pretty much everyone, from high-level federal officers to locally elected council members and even staff from NGOs. And on top of that, it hosts international delegates, sharing its whole model of rural development way beyond Pakistan's borders. It's this diversity that gives it such a massive systemic impact. And it's not just about training officials in a classroom. Oh no, PARD gets its hands dirty, directly at the grassroots level. For instance, it runs Herner Khada, which is a skills center that empowers local women with training in things like embroidery and painting. It also started Masjid Maktab. These are informal schools for girls in places where formal education is hard to come by. This is development in its most human, most direct form. So when you add all of this up, we're talking decades of training, research, and hands-on community work. You start to see the outline of a really profound and lasting legacy. I mean, this institution has left an absolutely indelible mark on how the country is run. So after all this, what's the one big takeaway? What's the single most important contribution of this unsung architect? What is the core idea that it has fought for over 60 years?
It all comes down to this one core philosophy. And this is PARD's greatest legacy, the absolute belief that true, lasting development can't be forced on people from the top down. It has to be built from the bottom up, with the active, participatory involvement of the people themselves. That, right there, is the heart of the Peshawar model.
So, in a nutshell, PAIRD's achievements are truly foundational. It professionalized a whole class of rural administrators. It built that crucial bridge between smart academic ideas and what actually happens in government. It helps standardize practices across the country. And most importantly, it has always been a champion for putting people at the very center of development.
And that leaves us with one final and, I think, really crucial question. The world has changed so dramatically since 1957. So how can an institution that was forged in the 20th century, with all its history and its established ways, adapt to solve the incredibly complex, fast-moving challenges of the 21st?